We have my new friend, Rihards Kols, who's a member of parliament and chair of the Foreign Relations Committee of the parliament in Latvia. As I mentioned, I just met him in the Leonard Mary conference, and I'm a big ideas guy, and he put some big ideas on the table there, and I thought it was very important. And we also have Denis Mercier. He's the former chief of the French Air Force and Supreme Allied Commander for Transformation in NATO. And I should tell you, at some point in this conference, we'll have my good friend, Ambassador Katerina Maternova, who is the EU ambassador to Ukraine and in Kiev right now. And I know that Katerina's people are listening. And hello, Peter and everyone. So we will bring Katerina in at a later point in the program. But let me just start with you, Rihards. When we were in Tallinn, you put a big idea on the table, and it had to do, in this case, with the crushing immediate need of resources for Ukraine and its struggle with Russia. There's been a debate about sovereign bank assets that various nations hold from Russia. There's a lot of it in Belgium, and I'm just interested. Go ahead, tell us what your big idea is.
Well, Steve, thank you. It was really to meet you first in Tallinn, and hi to everyone near and far. Just coming on that, it's not about big ideas, but it's about the sense of urgency. What is happening in Eastern Ukraine is something that really the information coming in is alarming, I would say. It's absolutely alarming. We can, continue to clap on our shoulders saying that we delivered 50 billion decision in the EU, we delivered in US 60 billion. It's not enough. It's not even close, because it has to be understood that biggest chunk of this money is actually something that Ukraine has already paid. So the leftovers is 1/3 of those funds allocated for the Ukraine to allocate to buy new military equipment. So this means we have to act more decisively. I welcome the decisions right now. Well, decision is not made, but at least it's being put on a table within the NATO to commit for 100 billion for Ukraine for the next 5 years. Let's see how it will be delivered at the NATO summit in Washington. Let's hope that there is a consensus within the NATO. But what we can do on the sidelines of that, on the sidelines, of course, the ongoing discussion is the frozen assets. And I'm not talking about the private entities, be it the physical persons or legal entities, but I'm talking about the frozen assets of the Russian sovereign funds, central bank assets that are, as you mentioned, the biggest chunk lays in Brussels, in their financial entities. And the question is, do we have the legal framework? So it happens that actually over the weekend, there much things have developed in Europe, Steve. I have to mention that European Union has given a legal framework across the board in EU that violating sanctions is criminal offense. This for the first time. This was also a challenge because we had so different regulations at the national level. In some member states, it was administrative fine and so on. So now it's been harmonized. The offense, bypassing, circumventing, violating, it's already criminal offense. That's one big step where right now it's being announced and the decision is made. The second one is that we have now delivered on this legal framework for member states to have the legal rights to use the accumulated wealth from those frozen assets. So here I'm talking about the windfall interest rates. So if we take, for example, Belgium, that holds the biggest chunk, around 190 billion Russian central bank assets, they generate around 3 to 4 billion annually in interest rates. So right now they have the legal rights to take this money and deliver it for Ukraine's reconstruction or provide them with the military assistance that they can procure. But there's a twist. What I'm being suggesting that we can amplify this sum 10 times. We should actually use these 3 to 4 billion as an interest rate that we're going to pay for a loan that we're going to take for Ukraine, be it 30 or 40 billion. And of course, I'm not talking about international lenders. They have preconditionalities and whatnot. Let's keep this money still from within the Europe or European Economic Zone. And I'm looking no further than the Nordic countries. If you look the Norwegian welfare sovereign fund, it amounts up to 1.6 trillion. I guess those folks have the means to actually provide this kind of loan. And if you tell them, look, if you provide this loan, we're going to give you back 10% of that, they will not find a better deal in the world. So they will have the moral ground as well. They're supporting the right cause. And also we can extend the support to Ukraine through this means as well. Sorry for
get a 30 or $40 billion instrument out there and then use the growth and gains of the Belgium fund to basically fund that loan, which you would then deliver for. I should also mention it's not just for immediate arms, but we're also looking at how you rebuild the Ukrainian defense industry. Thank you. Well, that gets me to another point. And I also want to tell our team that Jacques Pidelot, who's the ambassador of Switzerland in the United States and former head of intelligence in Switzerland, is a great thinker, like many of you on this. Bring him into the conversation as well if he wants to be. I'd love to see his face. But let me ask General Mercier. General, one of the things that also inspired today's program was the numbers, ammo, basic systems. Jake Sullivan, the president's national security advisor here in Washington, told a group of us on an occasion that it's going to be interceptors and ammo that determine the outcome of this battle, and we don't make enough of them. And so defense production is something that's been on my mind and what the barriers are. I also learned from a forum that GLOBSEC held that we had a total capacity in Europe of 300,000 units a year before this conflict began. That's now grown. So companies like CSG have an annual production of about 300,000 units. But at the beginning of this conflict, Russia was sitting on 14 million units. So when you look at the incredible disparity between even ammo, and I'm just interested in your thoughts on procurement, production, what our blind spots are there. Are we just all pretending this isn't a problem? And is it a problem?
Yeah, thank you very much. And it gives me the opportunity to share a few thoughts about this. And as I mentioned to you before, just before the meeting, and I'm a former military leader, but I'm now in the industry, and I can see both sides of the game, which is I think very important. And if I'm back to deterrence, there are three criteria for me that are essential for deterrence. The first is credibility. The second is the political resolve to use our forces. And the third is the strategic communication that goes with that. But when I talk about the credibility, we have always considered the credibility of our forces, that we have the right forces, we have the modern forces, we have the right command and control, but and we have the capability to innovate. There is something we are lacking, is the possibility, if we have the appropriate money, the possibility to manufacture our systems very quickly and to get the number of systems that we need in case something happened. We thought in the past we had time, and we see that we do not have. And I would like to share a few considerations how we would consider this. And first, you know, in NATO, I don't know if everybody's familiar with what we call the NATO defense planning process. Roughly, the NATO defense planning process is every 4 years, the NATO allies 32 nations at the head of state and government, they approve a political guidance to say this is what NATO should be able to deal with. And then the two military leaders, the SACEUR and the SACTI in NATO, they do an assessment of if this is what you want at the political level, this is what you need at the military level. And then we look at what exists in the nation, we make a gap assessment, and we come back to the nation and say, look, this is what you need to get in order to fill this gap and have the full capacity to fight together. That's the first thing, but we do that for the tanks, for the aircraft, the ships, and all the military capabilities. But we have never done that for the industry. And this is very important for me to have these kind of things where we could say what exists. We have huge capacities in both sides of the Atlantic regarding the industry in order to manufacture military capabilities. But we have never made an assessment of what this industry is capable of. And that's very important that we could conduct this kind of survey and this kind of process in order to have the complete view of what we are able to do in case of we have to produce a lot of weapons, a lot of ammunition, drones, everything. That's the first point. The second point is we do not have really agility in this industry because over the past years the industry adapted to the budget procurement laws, to the budget procurement and the defense budget, and they just scaled their capacities accordingly. And today we see that we need to not only scale the capacities with regard to what we deal with in terms of crisis today, but what will be the worst case scenario. And that's difficult, and there are possibilities to do things differently. In many areas, I'm thinking about drones, weapons, spare parts, maintenance, repairs, operation. We have the capacity to innovate a lot in this in these domains, and to associate, not only see what a drone is, but if you want to produce a drone, and we see in Ukraine they are massively used in the fight against Russia. A drone, you need to produce it quickly, very cheap, and on demand. And to do that, you need to think the manufacturing from the beginning. And you think your drone as you thought your aircraft before is going to be expensive, is going to be long to produce, and you will be wrong. So for a lot of capacities, we have this possibility to make research, to spend money, and see how our manufacturing could be different. That's the first point. Another thing is, if we speak about the tank,
just short form,
a fighter aircraft, a ship, it will be difficult to produce them on demand. But there are other ways to do that, and how we build our resilience. You know, today we see many nations when they sell military capacities, they sell offset as well. So that means many of the countries, they say that I buy your capacity, I need to have some industry in my country. But the question of offset is a whole question for me. The question is how we build resilience and say we sell military capabilities. We need to be sure that we multiply when we do that with our allies, even with our partners. The possibility for them to have manufacturing capacities, not only for offset, but to build the resilience and expand the number of factories that we have in case we have to produce more. And that's something I think we could develop, and even incentive to the military companies who sell abroad their capacities. Another thing is we have seen in the COVID, I have in mind, I'm in a board of automotive supplier. And what I've seen in the COVID crisis, those guys, they make automotives. And in the COVID crisis, because we are lacking masks in Europe, in 2 months, they produce thousands of masks. Why? Because the automotive sector, they are able to produce very quickly, very fast, with huge processes, everything you want. So do we have some kind of industries that are not directly related to the defense industries, but we can...
Well, that's what the United States has with the Defense Production Act.
And I see that, speaking frankly, I see many things like this developing in US. It's slower in Europe, but it's very important that both US and Europe, we adopt the same kind of pace in order to develop all these ideas in the industry. Because this is our...
We got to close it up, Denis.
That is behind that.
Okay, great. I apologize. Look, I want to ask you both very quickly. Representative Jim Himes has joined us, and I want to bring him into the conversation as well. But let me just ask you, we just went through a long period where we've got Adam Kinzinger, who'll be joining us in just a bit. And, Adam was basically advocating for his former GOP colleagues to do the right thing, to basically provide the various aid and support for Ukraine. That finally came through. It was a long, arduous process that raised significant doubts about whether that would happen. What happened within NATO in response to that period of purgatory? Was there doubt in the U.S. when it came? And I want you to be honest if you can. Did it send a shockwave through NATO that America might not be there in that important moment? Rihards?
Well, obviously we were worried. And as Parliament representatives, I traveled, I think, from October till beginning of April. I was 3 times in Washington, D.C. And I have to say, and this is for the first time, I've been in Parliament affairs for the past 10 years, and for the past 5, I've been chairing the foreign affairs. And this was the first time when the 3 chairs from the Baltics traveling, doors are closed. No one is willing to meet us. Everyone is preoccupied with the domestic issues, which we don't deny that there are challenges, of course. But what we were there is actually to put really raised the sense of urgency. And
right.
Well, I have to see we can, as I mentioned, suddenly the supplementary item of 60 billion, it became as symbol for U.S. credibility. That was what was at stake. Yes, U.S. delivered, and well, the question right now is how we're going to work, and this is our task for let's say Baltic colleagues, to engage with 120 those who voted against and try to convince them to be on the right side of the history.
General,
and just the last comparison. Please compare the Lend-Lease vote in 1941 with the vote right now with the supplementary item. It's just one-on-one.
It's very scary sometimes to look back at history. General Mercier, real 30 seconds if you can.
Just one thing is, if I look at NATO, there is one thing which is very important and that does not exist in any other organization. This is we have two operational commands, ACO, which is in charge of the current operation, and ACT, which is in charge of the future operation, and how we use both commands in order to deal with the current operation. But we have a full operational command looking at operational issues to see how we will continue to fight in the future together. And that's very important. And this is a huge value for NATO to have these both commands working together.
Thank you very much. Let's bring in, let's move to, and gentlemen, you're welcome to stay with us, but let's move to Representative Jim Himes.